Okay, in this video I will cover some more on HA and DRS. In previous video, which was a little long, actually way too long, we configured HA and DRS and we test HA functionality and it was working absolutely great. There are a few things I would like to mention in this video. That one of the things that when we configure HA or DRS, those settings we configured at cluster level, right? And those settings applies by default to all virtual machines. If you remember, I mentioned something in that video that you can make exceptions for individual VMs. For example, there are some VMs in your network or in your environment, I would say, which are very critical, and in case if disaster strikes, you want those VMs to start first. For example, you have your domain controllers, right? And you have your test servers, and you have your file servers, you have your SQL server, your Exchange server. So in this case, let's say if these VMs running on your host and that host went down, you want, for example, your domain controller to start first. Then you may want to start SQL and Exchange, and at the last you may want to start those test servers in case if there were any running on that machine, or a backup server or any kind of sort of server which is not very critical compared to other servers. So there is a priority that you can set, and of course machine with the higher priority will start first. And there are a few things that you may want to disable HA totally for some VMs. You can also do that. Same thing you can do for DRS. If you want to disable DRS for some VMs, you can also do that. You can even create DRS rules. For example, maybe I have Exchange Server DAG, do node Exchange Server DAG, and I want those servers like Exchange 1 and Exchange 2 to run on two different ESXi hosts. I don't want DRS to screwed up and while it's shoveling, VMs for better performance, I don't want Exchange 1 and Exchange 2 to end up on the same single host. So if in that case, if that whole host fails, my Exchange 1 and Exchange 2 would both go down and I will have a downtime. So to avoid this, of course, we can create rules. Same thing applies for some client server application. For better interaction and performance, maybe there are two servers that you would like to keep them on the same host so that they can have a faster communication. So this can also be done again by creating rules. So let me just show you real quick how to do that. Let's go to my vCenter here. Okay, and we are at the cluster level, right? Manage, and remember here we enabled HA for our entire cluster and DRS for our cluster. Right down there we have VM overrides, and that's the place where you can make exceptions at VM level. For example, if I go add here, right here I can add my VMs, for example server 1 and server 2, and what automation I want. This is for the DRS, fully automated, partially manually, or disabled. I don't want DRS to move that virtual machine at all. Fully automated, yeah, go ahead. Partial and manual, there will be recommendation, and in case of the VM it's restarted or start, it will always start on the best possible host. So here I can set the DRS level settings at the VM level. VM restart priority, this works for HA, low, medium, high, or use cluster settings. If it's by default is set to use cluster settings, it means whatever set at the cluster level will apply to all VM. I can make it high. So in this case, let's say if my cluster settings are is medium, which is by default is, and this VM is high and HA happened, and accidentally this VM is on the server or host which went down, and server 1 and server 2, let's say running on ESXi2, and ESXi2 goes down, server 1 will start first because it has a high priority, and then server 2, which will have a medium priority. So here you can set those priorities at VM level. And same thing for host isolation response. You can choose you want power off and restart VM, shutdown, restart VM. Shutdown is like a graceful shutdown, power off is like a enforced shutdown, like pulling off the plug. Same thing response for in case of permanent device loss. You can say power off and restart VM, for example. Response in case of alt path down, conservative and aggressive, you can say power off and restart VM. All path down and PDL, permanent device loss. These are the two terminologies, and you need to make an better understanding of these. All path down or permanent device loss, there are two types, accidental and unaccidental. I would say, permanent device loss, like, you lose the device. In this case, what usually happens in this case, there are many possibilities, and anything can happen based on that. For example, you may have an administrator, and that administrator, what it do, it's um, somehow remove the LUN, but it did not follow the best practice. So in this case, that could cause an issue, because you have two types of PDL or permanent device loss: planned and unplanned. And planned, of course, which is like, say, storage administrator wants to remove a LUN, but he did not follow the best practice, and it can cause some issues. Or even if he follow a best practice, the LUN will needs to be first unmounted, and then it needs to be deattached. So in this case, of course, when it will be unmounted and deattached, right? And then the storage administrator will remove the LUN, to that sort of device loss. Unplanned, of course, something happened unexpectedly, and it's unpresented from a storage array all of a sudden. And in this case, something might happen to it will amaze, or it will send, like, a sudden, like an accident. Something happened, something weird at the storage level, and that just disappear. So in this case, of course, an all path down is another situation where the paths, to that storage it's not available. All paths are, it's simply down. So in this case, all these case or scenarios, you need to make sure that what, or not make sure, basically you need to select that what action you would like via you would like vCenter to take in case if this happens, what you want to do. So you want maybe to restart VMs or do nothing, and that's what they're showing here. Or maybe you don't want to do anything. So all path down situation or PDL or permanent device loss situation, these are the two things which are storage related. And vSphere 6 now gives you a graphical view to set these values. And here down there, as you can see, it is showing the cluster level settings which are applicable. Same thing, whatever you do, if you click OK, that will apply to, you know, both servers. So that's how you set an individual VM level. I was talking about rules. The rules are here. For example, like if I click add and let's say test and add here server 1, server 2, I can choose what I want. Keep these virtual machines together or separate these virtual machines, you know, or virtual machines to host. For that, I create a VM group, and you can say like must run on host or must not, or should not. So basically, these rules will set the tone for you. What would you like for your VM? For example, as I say, Exchange 1, Exchange 2, part of a DAG. I want to keep this VM separate. So I have to do just separate VM, select those and say OK. So to make sure that these servers, you know, stay on different ESXi hosts all the time and should not end up on the same host. And if that host fails, I will have a downtime. Regarding HA, how would you know that which ESXi host is, you know, a master and which is slave? By the way, in case if you are coming up with the version 4, you know there was a concept of primary and secondary. Yeah, in version 4 in HA there was a concept of primary and secondary. You have up to 5 primary for servers, and then rest were secondary servers. And HA, when you talk about host isolation, um, the only option was network. There was no, you know, data store detection option was there. Architecturally it's different as well, because from version 5.0 onwards, HA use master slave concept. As I worked a lot with version 4 and version 5 and 6, so you might sometimes notice when I'm talking about version 5 or version 6, but I may still use a terminology of, you know, primary host or secondary. So I apologize for that, but the idea is that version 5 and version 6 use, you know, master slave concept. And there is a very good article I would like to show you for where you can tell the difference. I think it's over here, this one here. Comparing VMware HA and, you know, between 4.x and 5.x. It's same in vSphere 6 as well. And see, here are the differences. Main difference, it's a different agent. Automated Availability Manager here in version 5, it's FDM. Cluster members, they talk about the primary and the rest is secondary. And here in vSphere 5, it's use master slave. Only one master, rest are slave. If master fails, they start an election process. What are the responsibilities? Master host, what it does, it monitors the states of all slave hosts. If the slave hosts fail or become unreachable, then the virtual machine on those slave hosts will be restarted. It will monitor the power state of all protected VMs, manage the list of cluster hosts, act as vCenter management interface to the cluster. Means vCenter server talks to master, and master monitors the state of slaves. Host isolation, as I mentioned before, in version 4.x was based on network only, but here it's based on network and storage. How host failure detection happens: if its host stop receiving heartbeat, other host in the cluster, or host isolation address. By default, the host isolation address is gateway. If you remember in previous video, I did touch that point. By default, it's the gateway, but you can set exception to have some other address. and master slave management network is lost, then it think that's a host failure detection. So master host management network lost and cannot ping the isolation response IP address, then it's also a condition, means the host failure is detected, and or the master host fails. Slot size, the way it's calculated, it's something related to admission control and reservations. you know Slot size is bit different in version 6, 5 and 6, of course. Configuration files, there was no configuration file for HA, but here we have log files. Path is different, and this is the one, heartbeat data store. Like in last video, we configured data store for heartbeat. This concept was not there in version 4, but in version 5 and 6 we have it. And what it says, data store are used as a communication channel only when the management network is lost. So first, management network, if management network is lost, then it will check, okay, this are the data stores accessible to this host, and if this host is still accessing the database, is still accessing those files which are created over there, then yeah, it's all good. There is a temporary, that some network problem, but the host is still alive. And of course, in version 6, as I mentioned, you have this option which was not available to configure in details for permanent device loss and all that down. Let's go back. Here, all these settings of yours. This is the data store for heartbeat. Like, remember yesterday we did that. And VM component protection, this option was not there. Protect against storage connectivity loss. This option is there in version, I think it's version 5.x, 5.5 it started, if I'm not mistaken, but it was not that detailed. Like here, not everything was there, but here in version 6, lots of things has been given as a GUI. In previous version, you had to configure a few things related to all path down through the management shell, but now it's all here and you can configure it. I will encourage you to read about this situation, and in one of the video I will cover the right procedure, that what's the right way to remove a LUN from ESXi host, so that while you're working in a production environment, you should not make that mistake that can cause your ESXi servers to become unresponsive. Because if you deattach a LUN or remove a LUN in an appropriate way, the host daemon running on ESXi may become unresponsive, because it will keep searching for that. Oh, where is that LUN? Where did that LUN go? It will keep searching for that, and there could be a scenario that it might, the whole entire host become unresponsive. And don't forget, in a cluster scenario, LUN is accessible by many hosts, and if you remove that LUN from many hosts, it can impact many hosts, and that could cause big problem in production environment. Okay, so these are the few things I wanted to discuss. Yeah, and yeah, I wanted to show you one more thing. Yeah, how do you know which machine is primary? You can always end up here. See, vSphere HA state. Let me do a little zoom. Try to zoom it for you. Yeah, you see, vSphere HA state is slave. So if I go to ESXi2, for example, yeah, this is master. That's a master's day. So it will, it means this is the one that's communicating with slaves, and making sure if, in case if one of the slave fails, it will be responsible to start VM. Will it start on the master? No, not necessarily. It depends. The DRS, it will select the best possible host. So this is it, guys. I wanted to cover that, and I will encourage you to dig deep. And there are many references out there for to read more about it. Read more about admission control, slot sizes, and these two conditions. Permanent device loss, PDL, and APD, which is all back down. With these, if you have a better understanding of these concepts, that will make you a better vSphere administrator for sure, and you will know that what sort of problems to deal with. Because to be honest, with vSphere is no good, or no virtualization product is no good without a shared storage. And when you are talking about shared storage, you're talking about SAN. So you had to have, not necessarily you have an issue at vSphere level. You may have an issue at SAN level, and that can affect your vSphere. So you should know about some common troubleshooting, and especially from vSphere perspective, how to deal with the storage, how to manage the storage, and how to add LUN, which is not a big problem, but removal, yeah, how to remove a LUN in a right proper way. So this is it, guys, and I will see you